President Trump is bringing the hammer down on Harvard University. He's demanding changes to its curriculum, hiring, and admission practices. He's cutting billions in federal research grants and revoking Harvard's ability to admit international students. It's all in the name of curbing what he says is rampant anti-Semitism at Harvard. So, Lisa, is Trump actually trying to destroy Harvard as it exists today?
Look, I think this is, like so many things that he does, it's about owning the libs. It's about appealing to his base, who this is the kind of thing his base loves. You know, and now I think that's how it started, was sort of making an example of an institution known for, well, first of all, an elite, the most elite institution, and one that, has become known, unfortunately for its liberal slant on many things. But it now seems to be about digging in and punishing Harvard even more for fighting back, right? Because that's what they've done. And sadly, Harvard has made itself, over many years, an easy target. And to the extent I already thought that, it was driven home by a wonderful op-ed in the Sunday New York Times this weekend by a psychology professor there named Steven Pinker. And we've discussed it among ourselves here at the table, but for anyone out there who hasn't read it, I commend it to you, because it's a defense of Harvard and a very good and correct argument that what Trump is doing is outrageous and wrong in many ways. But it also goes a long way to sort of cataloging the sins that Harvard has committed along the way, and many other institutions, right? Promoting diversity to the point where it becomes calcified into rigid tests for hiring, for what is acceptable research and what is not, for suppressing alternative viewpoints, for limiting academic freedom. And this plays out in the form of vastly disproportionate numbers of liberal faculty. And so naturally, students are just not exposed to alternative viewpoints. Another example of hypocrisy here, and I say that's hypocrisy because, of course, the fundamental mission is to encourage critical thinking among students and expose them to different ideas. But another example of hypocrisy is, clinging to legacy admissions while claiming to be all about fairness and, in the form of affirmative action.
So he says it should be a meritocracy, and Lisa's saying that Harvard has shown that it's not. Would you agree with that?
I don't think any of our universities or the country as a whole is meritocracy. I mean, think about the fact that Trump wants to get rid of merit-based hiring in the federal government so that he can appoint loyal appointees. But I'm not sure that I disagree with Lisa, but what I will say is this. I think this battle is so much bigger than Harvard. I think this is a battle over the political narrative in this country, over who gets to decide what is and isn't fact, and what is American versus un-American. And I'll go back to some of the things that Lisa talked about. And it's Harvard and the other Ivy Leagues that have pretty much controlled that question, those kinds of questions, basically having the final say over these things, whether evolution or creationism is the truth, whether life begins at conception, or if it begins at viability, whether climate change is human-caused or a natural phenomenon, and then finally, whether gender is biological or if it's a social construct. So I think Trump, the MAGA base, have become frustrated with both the answers to these questions, but also the processes by which the answers have been arrived at to the exclusion of that base and set for the most part by a very tiny top 10% in the country that includes academicians.
I think he clearly is trying to destroy Harvard. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. The Steven Pinker piece, Pinker has been a huge critic of Harvard from within. But the issue, I think we've gotten to this place because Trump is upset that Harvard is not being Columbia. Trump went after Columbia, and Columbia gave in, and then Columbia found out that it wasn't getting its grants back. And so we got down the slippery slope, and Harvard has decided that they're not going to give in as easily. And so now everyone is doubling down. And that's what Trump is doing. That's why he's gone everything from the grants to, not allowing them to have international students, to saying, I'm going to get rid of your tax-exempt status. If you're going to get rid of their tax-exempt status, that really calls into play every institution of higher education's tax-exempt status. So I really do believe it's hard to see how he is not trying to destroy them in this.
If 3/4 of the professors at Harvard identify themselves as either liberal or very liberal, can some pressure like this work to diversify
I
the
think
viewpoints
the
there?
problem is that we are asking different questions here, right? Like as most political observers and political scientists would point out in that this is a very, very simple thing of a playbook of dictators, wannabe dictators and authoritarians like Viktor Orban, Modi in India, which is basically to destroy civil society in the sense that I'll go after universities and shape the universities based on my own ideological and partisan motivations. And that has been crucial in this case. It's not very much different. What I would say, though, we should not conflate free speech with academic freedom, right? Academic freedom is not the comment sections of Fox and Friends. Academic freedom is where you discriminate against bad ideas, right? You hold people to certain rigorous standards of research, rigorous standards of methods, and you don't employ certain people, right? Academic freedom works in a certain kind of discriminatory way, not allowing everyone. Now, if you want to say that, oh, we want to hire someone who does not believe in climate change, who goes against all data and all evidence, and we need to hire them. No, we don't need to hire them because it is going against a certain aspect of research that is held to be a problem. Now, has that been a problem before? Yes, eugenics was seen to be a science. Phrenology was seen to be a science, and later on it was debunked, right, over time. So I'm not saying that everybody is correct, but the academia doesn't work as a free speech club, right? Then you can go open a club. Now, another problem is these conservatives, they want DEI when it suits them, right? They now want all diversity and all, but all sociological studies generally say that as you become more and more educated, you become less conservative, except for economists, but that's a different thing.
Nina, you're chomping at the bit to get in here.
Yeah, because again, and not to beat a dead horse, Bloody, I hope it's not dead already, but I think it's a mistake to see this as simply about Harvard, or for that matter, academe, because it's the same playbook that we're seeing applied to the media. 50% of Americans still rely on the media as a main source of news and information. It's the same thing that applies to high schools and the push for school choice and vouchers, the same thing that applies to eliminating textbooks in certain elementary settings. And then finally, in regard to courts, this administration has waged an assault on courts, which are all about truth finders, and lawyers are part of that process. So if you look at how this same sort of enterprise of deconstructing truth and who controls it, perhaps toward the ends that Anirban has mentioned, it's beyond academia, and that's what I find most troubling.
Look, two things I want to get in here. One is that it's very important that Harvard is fighting back, because part of this is to terrorize the rest of academia and get them to fall in line out of fear that their international student, they'll be deprived of international students, which for many institutions is a significant source of tuition revenue, and otherwise get in line. The second thing about this, though, that of course drives me crazy is that Trump, who claims to be all about the economy, and the so-called conservatives now claim to be all about freedom and growth of the economy, right? This is nothing but pure economic self-sabotage. It cutting research, sending the brightest foreign students out of the country. All that does is hurt our economy in the long term.